I want to keep going in the story, but I have a huge stress breakout and don't really want you to see my face, so you can watch my workout. So I'll only mention one more thing about my labor and delivery, and that was after I got wheeled to my room. I don't know how many hours passed, but the doctor on call that day came into the room. After she did the exam, Matt and I asked the doctor what the next steps were for our daughter's Down syndrome. She hesitated and said, "This baby does not have Down." I said, "Well, please go pull my chart," because we had 4 markers from 20 to 30-week scans, and that increased to a 5th marker for Down by the time we were either at 36 or 38 weeks. She left the room, came back, and I can't remember what the response exactly was, but it was essentially, "We don't see any signs that your daughter, born physically here holding her, has Down syndrome." I didn't necessarily cheer or feel relieved or feel anything. I would have loved my daughter with Down syndrome. They are absolute angels on earth. I mostly was angry that I had put so much stock, that doctors had put so much stock into these scans and the markers for Downs, and hadn't counseled me more that it could be totally wrong, and that my daughter could not have Down. We hadn't told anyone about it except for my family, so we didn't really have to untell anyone. We really only had to tell my parents and my siblings that what we thought we would have a Gabby with Down syndrome, and we were all going to love her, and it turns out that she does not have Down syndrome. My eldest daughter's middle name is Lisa, for the name of Adam, my brother who died. Adam, the girl that he was going to marry, was Lisa. I didn't nurse my daughter for very long, so I know it was within a couple weeks of birth that we were invited up to my in-laws' house near Minneapolis to watch a slideshow of a Africa trip that they had gone on. Like, neighbors were over, friends were over. Oldest sister-in-law and middle sister-in-law, of course, weren't there because they don't live in the state. But of course, since Matt and I live here and live, semi-close, doesn't matter that I have a very new baby. We were required to be at this event. And I went into a private room to nurse my daughter, and I still remember my father-in-law bursting into the room and saying, "Bethany, I'm trying to get the slideshow going. Can you hurry up and get out here so we can..." This is when things really started to hit the fan, with noticing how much I was required and expected to do with my in-laws, and how much resentment that it built up in me. I still didn't have any clue what enmeshment was. Still I was years from that at this point. But I was just so upset with their meddling in our lives. Being a stay-at-home mom is when I took maternity leave from work, and essentially in that moment became a stay-at-home mom. That's like, kudos to whoever can do it, because that's one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't mentally do well with staying home, to the fact that I ended up going back to work at 8 weeks. Work would have given me 12, but I went back at 8. And I got a lot of guilt for that from, specifically, I remember my mother-in-law and oldest sister-in-law giving me a pretty hard time about, the fact that I didn't love my daughter enough. I remember a lot of, you just can't make it work, Bethy, both with the wanting to go back to work, and I didn't want to, I personally, my personal decision was that I didn't want to nurse. I didn't do well with it. It wasn't something that I loved doing. And I very, very much have memories specifically of my mother-in-law and oldest sister-in-law just really making me not feel good about those decisions. Usually worded as if, "So you just can't do it, huh?" Like nope. Mother-in-law really meddled with my daughter's appointments. Is she going to the correct appointments? Is she getting the correct shots? And again, if you're new to this story, you're like, how could you think that that's mean? That's wonderful that she cared that much. But, I had it all under control. It was all taken care of. Let me do it. Let me raise my child. When Gabby was 4 months old, when she was 5 months old, I found out that I was pregnant again. My daughters were going to be 13 months apart in age. Despite being pregnant and with a baby, we were very heavily obligated and guilted into attending a vacation that was 8 hours away. In this vacation, we did actually have a bed, but we had one room that we shared with our daughter, which was fine. I would have wanted to be by her anyway, but this was the vacation where the infamous hug thing happened, where I finally said I don't like hugs, and my mother-in-law finished by hugging me. I'm going to continue on with my flow, not only in story, but as a workout for you to watch instead of looking at my face and seeing my stress breakout. For followers who've gone to the very beginning of my posts and been with me through the whole 5 months, my story of narc abuse from my in-laws essentially started in March 2020 and ended with my mother-in-law cornering my husband in our own kitchen while I was away from the house. We went no contact at that point from the overt abuse during that time period. And from there, my posts went back in time to the start of my relationship with my husband, red flags I missed, things in our life, etc. Within that story was the death of my beloved brother and now the birth of my first child. My eldest was born 8 days before Thanksgiving, but obviously within enmeshed family structure, again, I didn't know that's what it was at the time, you go to Thanksgiving even when you're 8 days postpartum, 6 days home from the hospital where you had a retained placenta that caused a 3rd-degree tear when manually removed. I don't remember much of that Thanksgiving event other than not wanting anyone else to hold my baby except me and feeling absolutely exhausted. While sorting some things for our upcoming move, I recently came across a picture that was really hard to look at. I showed it to my husband as well. It was of all my in-laws at our house during that same Thanksgiving weekend. To be clear, I didn't host the actual Thanksgiving event that had a whole bunch of extended relatives, but with the sister-in-laws in town, yes, middle sister-in-law is in the picture too. They must have come down to our house at some point during that holiday weekend, and in the picture, I'm doing a very small, forced smile. I look exhausted, bloated, and probably really didn't want them at my house that day. In my new practice of holding my past emotions in the spirit of my therapy with my trauma-informed therapist, I held space for that Bethany when I found that picture, that exhausted, birth-traumatized, sore, puffy Bethany, who probably didn't want to put on normal clothes or be around in-laws only a day or two after already being at a really big Thanksgiving event. I was taking the mini pill after I gave birth with the intent that I'd nurse my daughter for a while, but nursing ended up not being for me. However, in the mind fog, life insanity of that first year of motherhood, I forgot, despite being a pharmacist, that the mini pill wasn't going to give me the best contraceptive coverage since I'd stopped nursing. You probably see where I'm going with this. When Gabby was 5 months old, I discovered that I was pregnant again. Being a mother was already so identity confusing for me, if you will, that I was sadly devastated to be pregnant again. I didn't tell my husband right away, hoped that going into denial would make it disappear. I did tell my mom at some point, who shrieked with joy, which did give me the strength to tell Matt. He felt about the same way that I did. Obviously aware that we will love our new baby, but oh my gosh, we have a 5-month-old right now who still hasn't established a sleeping routine. Another video of my mobility flow. Unfortunately, my breakout still is not really going away, and now I have intense sinus pressure from allergies. So anyway, moving on, I had my second-born daughter a few days before Christmas, using techniques such as very uncomfortable abdominal massage, staying upright in a squat, blah, blah, blah. My placenta delivered naturally. I referred to this in a past post, but my mother-in-law was extremely pushy about how much it would mean to her if I would come to the extended relative get-together on Christmas Day. Though I didn't have a 3rd-degree tear this time around, I was only 4 days postpartum on Christmas Day, aka my newborn was 4 days old, and now I had 2 babies. Since my oldest, I had them 13 months apart, and my 13-month-old couldn't even walk yet. every new mother is exhausted, but I felt like I was somewhat a new level of exhausted. My mother-in-law asked me more than 4 times if I could just attend Christmas. It'd mean so much to her, and she didn't want to pressure. That's her MO, to add that disclaimer, but she really thought it important that I was there. I even remember the shirt she was wearing. It was blue with black stripes, and where I was sitting in my living room as she came in for the pressured attack the 4th time. For that one, my father-in-law snapped at her, "Well, you are pressuring her. She already said no." And I loved him so much in that moment. I'm going to point out details that may seem nitpicky to some, but for those who've experienced this type of abuse, they'll either know exactly what I'm talking about and or have endured something very similar. One of those details is that my mother-in-law took a bunch of pictures of me when she visited us in the hospital to see the second born. In one of them, I look really, really rough. And when she showed the stack of them to me a few days later, all printed off at Walgreens, I made the passing comment, "Oofda, we can do without this one," or something like that. I was just really puffy in it, and just looked exhausted and maybe just even a bad angle, but it was really rough. And months later, when I visited their home, this was the photo that she had chose to frame as the quintessential place-marked photo of my second born's birth. I also want to say it went into her collage of holiday photos for her holiday card, but I can't say that for sure. I may just be misremembering that part. When I met my in-laws, something I do have a clear memory of is that I thought they would be incredible grandparents. They were, everyone thought they were the cats, meow. They had this perfect image of being perfect humans. And Matt and I thought how wonderful they would be at the whole grandparenting thing. But they surprised us by not really wanting to help. They wanted us to attend events where other people were, but they didn't want to spend time with us, maybe just holding the baby while I napped or showered, connecting with the baby. Instead, they would need an event or something for us to be together. They would need an event, an actual conversation. And hey guys, so I'm shooting this while my husband is at the pool at 8 p.m. Eastern time after a full day, full 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Universal Studios Orlando. I didn't know today was Mardi Gras. I'm super sheltered. I don't know these things. It was a fantastic day, by the way. The parade was amazing. Wonderful day at Universal Studios Orlando. Do I feel guilt that I sent my husband to the pool with them? No. So as I kind of left off in the last video, we had thought that they would be amazing grandparents. That was really something that we held out for. But when we had our babies, they just didn't seem interested. They wanted us at events, but they didn't seem interested in actually helping us and maybe caring for the girls, even under our roof. I'd take a nap and they'd hang out with the girls. They weren't interested. So we kind of told ourselves that, well, maybe they'll be the type of people who want to hang out with our granddaughters when they're 3 and 4. I'm not a baby person. Maybe they're not a baby person. Throw them a bone there. Maybe they're going to be more, interacting and stuff as the years go on. Newsflash, that never ended up happening. But anyway, back to where I somewhat was in the story. So at some point I have a 6-month-old youngest daughter and an 18-month-old oldest daughter. I'm still very unaware of enmeshment and the whole obligated thing at this point, so we allow ourselves to be dragged to a summer vacation in Wisconsin. I can't remember how far it was from our house, probably 5 or 6 hours, I'm guessing. 2 things that stuck out at this vacation was something I alluded to in another video where my mother-in-law took my 18-month-old down to the water. I was still up at the cabin, and I remember from the house, I didn't trust my mother-in-law with my daughter. She never felt like she totally had her wits about her when taking care of my children. And she waded into the lake water with my 18-month-old and let go of her hand while I was watching. She got distracted by mother-in-law's elderly parents were doing something on the beach, let go of Gabby's hand and went to help them as I absolutely trucked the, 50, 100 yards or so down from the cabin to the water, which it's not like my daughter went under the surface, but who lets go of a child's hand when the child is thigh deep in a lake? The vacation that year also ended up being over my brother Adam's, my deceased brother's birthday. I remember being pretty down on that day. My brother's birthday, those are hard days for me. And at one point, my mother-in-law must have noticed my blunted affect and asked me what was up. And I shared that, it's Adam's birthday today. And I remember she said, "Oh, okay, and went on with doing whatever she was in that moment. Back to Minnesota. Yay, it is cold. My post today won't be so much about in-laws stuff, but more just about two other semi-traumatic experiences in my life thus far. So it's September 2016. I have a almost 2-year-old and a getting close to being 1-year-old. They were being cared for by an at-home daycare lady in the town that I live in. When I still was driving up to Minneapolis to work, I got a phone call from the daycare lady late in the day that my daughter had fallen while she was at her home. And the daycare lady was saying, I'm concerned because after crying a whole lot, she immediately fell asleep, but your husband just picked her up. I just wanted you to know. I kind of just hoped, okay, I mean, I've been through enough. Things gotta be fine. Yep, okay, it'll be fine. I get home and my husband says, Gabs is laying in her crib, and I walk in and she's just staring at the ceiling. I'm sure it's really frustrating to hear my stories at this point because a lot of the theme is always just, you just hope it'll be okay. It didn't help that in a time like this, you do really wish you lived closer to a city or just some sort of like urgent care that you can go to. My gut feeling wasn't right. Obviously, my almost 2-year-old shouldn't just be laying in her crib staring at the ceiling at the end of the day, not speaking. So I didn't even change out of my work clothes. I scooped her up and told my husband to keep the 8-month-old at home, 9-month-old, and I'm going to head up to an urgent care. I just kept keeping an eye on her from my rearview mirror, and I still remember the interchange as I neared Minneapolis where I looked in the rearview mirror, and she didn't look like she was sleeping. I could tell that she was unconscious. Pulled off to the side of the road to make sure that she was breathing and kind of was able to get her to arouse. I took her to an urgent care that was about 10 minutes from that location. They told me that kids fall all the time and to just take her home and she would be fine. That she wasn't seeing any signs in Gabby's vitals that we needed to be concerned about. My mom gut was not okay. We walked out of that urgent care, and as I was getting to my vehicle, she threw up on my shoulder, down my hair, down my arm, as I put her into the vehicle. I called triage at her pediatrician's office, who told me to head to Children's Minneapolis, which is a hospital in Minneapolis. I just kept looking in the rearview mirror, making sure that I could see her chest rising and falling as I drove. Parked in the ramp, scooped her up. It was a blur walking through the hallways. I do remember pulling off my blouse that had vomit on it and just walking into the hospital in my camisole. She was just dead to the world per se, bad use of the phrase there, but just out, just totally out on my shoulder as I just went into, I just remember just looking at the signs and barely speaking to anyone. I probably should have. You're just moving as quickly as you can, thinking if I ask for help, it'll slow me down. It's a huge hospital, if you didn't get the drift. I finally reached the ER check-in area and I say her name, and I think you'll know what I mean. This is one of those times where you don't necessarily want to hear, oh, this is Gabby so-and-so. Come right in. We're waiting for you. So I walked into trauma room 1 of Children's Minneapolis with my daughter. They lay her down, are firing a million questions at me. Just very, very confusing moment. I wonder if I was also having a bit of PTSD with my brother's death, his falling death himself being just 3 years earlier. And maybe that's just a normal thing, to just be extremely, extremely confused in that moment. Long story short, she had a subdural hematoma, a brain bleed. It did not require a shunt or any other life-saving measures in that regard, but she did stay 3 nights in the pediatric ICU. It was very hard calling my parents and telling them that we were not only at the ER, but that Gabby had fallen. Again, my brother fell to his death 3 years before this date of this occurrence with Gabby. A lot more details. The only other kind of traumatic experience with that I'll talk about is that on her original scan where they saw the subdural hematoma, she had retinal hemorrhaging, or appeared to have retinal hemorrhaging. I did not know this at the time, but an acute subdural hematoma with signs of retinal hemorrhaging is like a hallmark symptom for shaken baby syndrome. I did not know this at the time. I very quickly got to know that that's what it was. And the reason I say I got to know what this was is because we went into, from that point, intense scrutiny. I just wanted to hold my baby, be next to her bed, but my husband and I were questioned together. We were questioned separately. We were questioned by different doctors at different times. And at first it was like, why are they asking us the same questions over and over again? And then it became clear that they suspected us because of, again, this acute subdural hematoma accompanied with retinal hemorrhaging is a sign of shaken baby syndrome. Either Matt and I didn't hold up well on questioning, or it is just hospital protocol that with the retinal hemorrhaging, you do a whole body MR scan. Gabby had to do an entire scan, which she screamed through to make sure she was not a victim of child abuse. Good morning. Thank you for this question. When we started getting repeatedly questioned over what happened to Gabby, I called my daycare provider, Natalie, and really kind of asked for more details. I didn't really know yet that we were under suspicion. I just was like, man, they're sure asking me a lot of questions. So if you could give me any detail you have of what happened, that would be great. She did amend her story a little bit. It went from, oh, she fell off the couch to, I think she fell off the couch and hit my marble coffee table on the way down, which made a little bit more sense to me too, and I added that to the doctors, but then I think they saw that as me trying to come up with another explanation, because one of the doctors had said a 2-year-old child doesn't fall off a couch and end up with a subdural hematoma. And so I thought by saying, oh, I talked to the daycare lady, she hit a marble table possibly on the way down. I wonder if they saw that as just an excuse or me trying to come up with another story. So Gabby went and had to have that whole body MR scan, which was terrible because I couldn't hold her and she was screaming and they had to put her in all sorts of positions and she had to lay flat and they were putting her in like little devices so that she would stay still. Again, I understood why it had to happen, but it was just very hard to endure. So that scan finished, and again, I can't remember the exact order of events, but at some point they decided that my child did not have current or past signs of physical abuse. Again, I also can't remember at what point this happened. It was after. I mean, I'm still following the same timeline, just can't remember the exact timing, but whether it was on a report or a doctor came in or a medical team came in and told us that the retinal hemorrhaging that was an added part of the subdural hematoma. So again, the subdural hematoma with retinal hemorrhaging is kind of that hallmark sign of shaken baby syndrome. They determined that the retinal hemorrhaging aspect of the subdural hematoma must have been an artifact on the scan. I don't know if they looked back at the scan and made that determination. I don't know if after you see that on the scan, do the whole body imaging and the baby doesn't have signs. I don't know how that works in the medical field. If anyone knows, that would be great. I don't know if they just decided that the retinal hemorrhaging was an artifact after they saw that the whole body scan didn't have anything, or if they really did take another look and determine maybe, so that artifact on the imaging means that it's something that showed up in the image that isn't indicative of real life. Either way, we were finally discharged, and they said something along the lines of, it'd be great if she wouldn't hit her head for a while she's healing. And it's like, she's 2, how do you stop a 2-year-old from hitting their head? So she wore a helmet for a while. The day that I started a TikTok account was the day that I did my first post. I had, of course, heard of TikTok, usually with a negative connotation associated because of my husband and what he teaches during an entire quarter of curriculum with his 8th grade. This curriculum is on the pitfalls of social media. When I was enduring the final catastrophic phases of narcissistic family cult abuse and going no contact with my in-laws, my sister mentioned to me that there was a content creator on TikTok who sounded like she had a monster mother-in-law, monster sister-in-laws like I did. I watched one single video of that creator and suddenly had this watershed moment of realizing I could scream the toxic escalation of my own abuse while somewhat remaining anonymous, more so on TikTok versus a platform like Facebook. Lately, I'm noticing that I'm having a version of writer's block with content creation. And what I mean by a version of is that it's not that I'm running out of things to elaborate on or that I'm running out of things that I'm inspired to talk about. It's that I've recently noticed I'm under more scrutiny from people that know me. Even when I had 10, 20, 30, 40,000 of you, I knew that I still wasn't followed much by people who actually know me, but that's changed. For example, a couple weeks ago, a student in one of my husband's classes blurted, "Mr. So-and-so, I didn't realize your wife was TikTok famous." Another example is that people I knew in high school, some of who had some occasions of bullying me, are now following me. To be clear, I'm not getting negative commentary from any of these people that I know of, but it's just this feeling that more people that I know are watching, that they're noticing. And a part of me wonders if this is why my body dysmorphia has reared its head recently. I terribly struggled with it for a very long time in my life until I had my children. After my med-free natural childbirths of my daughters, I gained a respect for my body that I'd never had in my life before. Gone were the tendencies to measure myself, to note it and track it. Gone was the compulsion to run my hand across my stomach multiple times a day. But that's back, as I've talked about in the past couple weeks. It's back with a vengeance, and I find myself wondering if the loss of anonymity has something to do with it. So it sucks to go into another traumatic story, but that's kind of the chronological of what I'm telling. So my daughter, Gabby, hit her head and went to the hospital per my last story in September of 2016. Then in December of 2016, when I went down to Iowa to see my childhood family for Christmas, the present from my mom was a spa day for myself, her, my sister, and my sister-in-law. I believe we also included Lisa, my brother Adam, my brother who died, the woman he was going to marry. We included her as well. Left back at the house, my parents' house, was my husband with my now 1-year-old and now 2-year-old Gabby and Sophie. While we were gone and my husband was taking care of them, 2-year-old Gabby found an earplug, one of the styrofoam squishy ones, and we think put it in her mouth, and then I guess it fell into the back of her throat, or she tried to swallow it. I don't know. Either way, it got stuck. My husband noticed while he was bottle feeding the 1-year-old, because 2-year-old Gabby came out of the bedroom that she was watching her iPad in, and he said was starting to froth at the corners of her mouth and her face was bright red. I asked him for more details this morning, but he said it's the worst memory that he has and he didn't want to talk about it. I wasn't going to press. So essentially what happened is that my dad was home too. We were staying with my parents while visiting for Christmas. They had to call the ambulance. Ever since my brother's death, one of my dad's worst points of PTSD is ambulances. It doesn't even have to be an ambulance on the street in real life. It can even be an ambulance like in a movie or a TV show that triggers him. So imagine an ambulance being called on Christmas Eve for his granddaughter less than 3 years after the tragic, horrific death of his son. So Matt calls me at the spa and I happened to be between treatments, whatever I was getting done. And so I answered and he says, Gabby is struggling to breathe. She's wheezing. She's like frothy. Her eyes are bugging out of her head. The ambulance is on the way. I stayed on the phone with him, unable to talk to him at times because he put the phone down. So I was listening when the ambulance arrived. Apparently at first they tried to extract it, were unable to. And so then I can't remember if they gave her something to eat or juice, but they did get it to go down and then everything was okay.